So what we've got for this afternoon is between now and 3:30. Those of us who are sitting up front, in addition actually to quite a few other people in the room, have been around this centre for around 30 years. For sort of 5 minutes each, we're just going to share something of a memory of that time. And then Lalita Raj is going to lead us in a ritual for about 20 minutes around the whole building of the space in which we are. So I'm not going to introduce everyone because otherwise it's mostly me talking and I'll take up, I want my 5 minutes to say something else. So I'm just going to sort of invite people to share in turn. And we might have space at the end as well for questions. We'll just see how the time goes. But this bit is really marking the start of the North London Buddhist Centre. So when we say marking the start of it, it's for 20 years here, but that was preceded by 10 years in a rented space around the corner. So we're going back sort of 30 years here to the start. Kusala, may I invite you to start?
Okay, thanks. I'm a bit nervous, but hello everybody. Buildings are great, and this is a great building. But as far as I'm concerned, people make the centre. And I want to just reminisce about two people who made a tremendous contribution to the centre and who very sadly are no longer with us. Their photos are downstairs, you can go and look. 30 years ago, roughly, we opened the old centre with a tremendous hoo-ha. The place was packed out. Banti came along and spoke. There were order members and who knows what who seemed to come from all over London. That was the opening night. Next week, I pitched up to the Friends evening, and there was one other person in reception, a rather shy, nervous-looking man who introduced himself as Chris. And Chris and I did 4 years of Mitra study together. Mitra study in those days was meant to last 3 years, but the bloke in charge had no real sense of time. So it ended up as 4 years. And this shy, tense man just blossomed and really came out of himself beautifully in Mitra study. He became a really dear friend of mine. And I learned his story. He was a school dropout. He'd been an intravenous drug user, a habitual shoplifter, and had gone straight after a short prison term and become a gardener. He told me he decided to straighten himself out. The way he did it was come along to the North London Buddhist Centre. Most of you probably don't know, the name Chris doesn't mean much to many of you. Some of you I know, but most order members know of the Abhaya Ratna Trust because Abhaya Ratna is who he became. He was eventually able to purchase a small house in Birmingham, and after his death, he left a legacy. The value of the house turned into a trust fund, which basically cares for order members who fall on hard times, and there are quite a few of them, unfortunately. If you've heard of the Abhaya Ratna Trust, you've heard of one of the best friends I made in the order. He really was a lovely guy. He used to look after my mother's garden for a while. My mother adored him. He said he could hardly get any work done because she kept flying in with coffee and biscuits. And she was so fond of him. I would also say he had this naughty, playful quality that some of you will remember. We put on occasional talent evenings where he impersonated a country and western singer called Randy Buck. And he would stand in front of the audience with a guitar and say, "Hi, I'm Randy." Well, order members are meant to tell the truth, aren't they? And all I can say is that he was a real tribute, that from such an unpromising start, he turned into such a wonderful human being. I still miss him. I still miss him. He was a great bloke. Going back to that same evening at the old centre, after I'd met the future Abhaya Ratna, I was introduced to the Mitra convener. I'd expressed an interest at that time in becoming a Mitra convener, and I was introduced to a man who it turned out later had been Chris's partner in crime. I'm using the word crime intentionally, but before they contacted the movement, it was quite important to get that bit clear. I wanted to become a Mitra. I was introduced to the Mitra convener, and he's actually on the photo. This strange, emaciated looking man of most eccentric appearance. He looked a bit like Riff Raff in the Rocky Horror Show, if you know what I'm talking about. And I had a conversation with him, and the main thing I remember about the conversation, he must have had some dental work done, because basically when he spoke to me, his lips went one way, his teeth went the other. And I was sort of like this. And I remember driving home that evening thinking, well, perhaps they've got another Mitra convener who's kind of normal. This was Deva Priya, who, again, I think for some people in the movement is something of a legend, and I think quite reasonably so. I did the 4 years of Mitra study with him. He was inspiring. He was a great help for parents and children retreats, lots of photos of them downstairs. My children thought he was great. He was remembered fondly at Buddhafield as well. I got used to his weirdness, but the poor man had chronic health problems. He was in more or less constant pain. And his funeral and funeral celebration here was one of the biggest events I've ever seen at the centre.
And it's on the film downstairs.
It is, yeah.
And so I've been told, and Peter and others, Denise, performed at it. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, let's not clap between, we'll just go on. It'll be fine. Thank you so much. Thank you. I remember them both very fondly too. I now want to hand over to Ratnadakini, who was very important.
Oh,
to
well,
me.
I don't know where to start. Very nice to be here, seeing so many familiar faces. So I've come up from Sussex, but I used to live in North London around Parliament Hill for many, many years, and travel over to Bethnal Green 4 times a week, for classes, and it was a bit much. And I really wanted to have a centre in North London. So I started running classes in Highgate Road. Kulamitra started taking classes in Crouch End. So we were both running classes, and then we decided, you'll have to tell me if I'm wrong, we decided to amalgamate our classes, and he, was very on the go of getting it bigger. So the classes got bigger and popular, and people came to Crouch End. So at the same time, I was interested in working in India. So I was going to India because I'd been there before for a trip on my own. But I went there to teach the women on retreat. So I did 3 months teaching women being on retreat with them. We had a great time. But I said to Kulamitra and Kulananda before I left, look, if I don't want to stay in India, can we please start a centre? Quite sort of strongly. And so they said yes. So when I got back, I realised, well, I was never going to learn Marathi. I'm absolutely useless at any language, even English. And so I thought, I'll get better at English and let's start a centre in North London. So Kulamitra and Kulananda agreed to start a centre, and that's how we started, as far as I remember.
It's only a couple of minutes. So she's also in this photo.
So that photograph was taken when we opened. So and we had the most amazing team, some of which the people are here now. It just was, well, just amazing, the amount of people that came and helped, like Patty, Peter, I'm not going to remember names now because there's so many, but basically that building, for those of you who didn't know, it turned into a whole community of us, because we had the centre. I was doing reflexology and massage there, because and in those days we never got supported. You now see a chairman's, we need a chairman, and you get so much money. I mean, we never used to get paid for anything. So I was Mitra convener for 7 years, and I earned my keep by doing massage and reflexology. So the centre was one of the places that I did it in, but I did it in Bodywise in Bethnal Green and at home. And anyway, so that was another story. But so yeah, became Mitra convener, did a lot of retreats with the women, and the whole Sangha grew. But we also had communications office down the corridor with Kulananda and Vishwapani, who Vishwapani you might hear on Thought for the Day sometimes. And then upstairs was Karuna, who used to be A for India when I worked with him. So it was just fantastic. It was just like this whole life of vibrancy and love, I suppose. So and we had a band. We had Shanti, absolutely amazing music. Sumina and Peter and other people.
Denise.
Yeah. Anyway, it was. I've still got the CD. So yeah, that's probably. I mean, I was there for 7 years, and was beginning to get a little bit jaded, and decided to go off to New Zealand for a year to meditate, because I'd been there for a visit. And but I'll just say this.
No, you've got time. Yeah,
it's quite funny. So I went there for a year to meditate, because I was a really serious meditator, and really wanted to take my practice even deeper. So I left my daughter here with our lovely dog Hope, because some of you will remember Hope.
Definitely.
Hope lived till he was 17. Anyway, I stayed basically after about 3 months. The chairman in Auckland, he had a bit of a breakdown. The Mitra convener had a breakdown, and there was no one to do much work, teaching. So I stepped in and held up the Auckland Buddhist Centre for the next 7 years. Became Mitra convener again for my
benefit. merit. I'm sure. Yes.
There was another word you were looking for.
Possibly.
Yeah. It was quite funny, because my daughter came out with Hope, and she did a degree out there, an arts degree. But then she came back to England after her 3.5 years, and then she got a bit fed up with me being there and asked me to come back. So and our relationship was just getting a little bit tenderly difficult. So I thought I better come back, and then she'll go off to Spain again to live, and then I'll go back to New Zealand. And then I didn't, because I fell in love with an old partner. We got married, and Nara went to Spain. So that's about it, isn't it?
Thank you.
Yeah. But I'm really, really thrilled that the centre has it's just blossomed and grown and continues to do so. So yeah, it's wonderful. You all benefit.
Yeah, and also, thank you, Ratnadakini. And also, just to say, I actually sent Ratnadakini an email on Wednesday morning. I woke up in the morning thinking, I should have spoken, I should have invited her. And I sent her an email saying, it's probably too late, but you should know this is happening. And you just got straight back to me in 5 minutes saying, well, actually, it'd be really nice. And here you are. And it's so lovely that you came.
It's nice you asked.
Yeah, and Ratnadakini was, I became a Mitra, she was the Mitra convener. And
I used to give you reflexology.
That too.
I knew you before you had children.
Exactly.
And you.
Yeah. Oh, so thank you for being here. Yeah, no, but it really is thriving. It's wonderful. But yeah, thank you for all you've done to start it as well. Yeah, I can, You see, people do want to clap anyway. You want to go next one? Yeah. Peter.
Yes, Peter, formerly known as Manjadeva. Yeah, it's a bit overwhelming after being here. So I got an email from Ratnadakini inviting me, and I had an immediate yes. It was funny because normally, to be honest, when I get invited to Triratna things, well, I don't, because I'm no longer part of the community. It's just not my life anymore. So, but like, I just had this kind of, yeah, I really want to come and see some people and be here and just take it in, and it's really, I'm really glad to be invited. Yeah, I mean, the word, like, it's foundational, this place for me, even though I've moved on. Like, there's something very, like, it's part of my blood and bones in some way, and I literally have some of my blood and not bones, plenty of blood and tears and sweat in these very floorboards. So yeah, it was quite a thing. I mean, bringing this together was an extraordinary feat of faith, really. I just glimpsed in that video downstairs, but I remember saying we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't, we just made it up as we went along. I was surprised none of us had major injuries, to be honest, because we had no health and safety whatsoever, knocking the walls down. But yeah, I guess we were driven by some kind of, the essence that is about people, but people need a place, don't they? They need a place that's beautiful and a home. I think that was kind of what it was about for me. So yeah, I'm very pleased to hear that it's nearly paid off. I remember signing the mortgage for £750,000, which is more money will ever go to my hands again, probably. And feeling very sort of grown up doing that. And here we are. It's paid off. It was amazing. Wow. Yeah. So formative and foundational, and yeah, it's just poignant. I mean, I suppose one of the things I take away from Buddhism is that teaching. Things keep on flowing, don't they? Changing, and here I am. You're older, greyer. Actually, the floors are still exactly the same, which is weird. The building's pretty much the same. Everyone else has grown. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sure. Well, I'm nearly finished anyway. So I feel grateful to be here and grateful to revisit this foundational piece of my history. It means a lot to me. Thanks. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. I mean, and those of you who saw, I mean, those of you who've seen sort of clips of the video that was put together and shown over lunchtime, and one of the things that struck me watching that is that you were saying, it's quite easy to get people to come in and knock stuff down and things, but there were many, many days where it was basically you and Kulamitra who were there.
And Arthacharya. There was three of us for like months on end, just like grinding away.
So was Arthacharya chairperson?
No, he wasn't chair, but he did a lot of the building work.
He was manager.
He was the centre manager.
He was centre manager. Yeah, I did write to him as well. He's in Australia.
I did tell him about this.
But this is, and literally you were sort of masterminding. This is, all of these floorboards were already used, weren't they? So you were having to get them cleaned up in order to be able to set a floor and things.
There's a squeak over there. Never went away. It's still there.
Well, it's fantastic that you've come back to see it like this, because it really is thriving, and it wouldn't have been without everything that you put into it, And again, I don't suppose the wage was very high in those days either, was it? No. So thank you so much. Thank you. Would you like to go next?
Okay. Haven't got much to say, but the first memory of
this is Jasmine, for those who don't know her.
Yes,
Jasmine.
I was introduced to this Triratna by Shantimati over there, who knew me when I was still doing theatre design at art school, and then by the time this building came about, I think when you and Kulamitra were knocking out walls here, me and Kusala were actually painting St. Mark's studio,
Yeah.
white, because it had to be returned to its pristine thing. And so my first view of this building was first the porch. Well, that's nice. And you walked in, and luckily there weren't any walls there, and I was wondering what happened. There must have been something, because my memory was it was all open. But having seen on the video what you were doing while we were going, really having a go with sledgehammers and stuff. But when I got here, it was an evening benefit with Shanti, with David Priya, and Vimala Chitta was singing. Yeah. And you were, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Because I can only remember Vimala Chitta and David Priya because it was so dark. Walked into this dark, dingy building, all bare, smelling of cement and concrete. And at the top of this long concrete stairs was Phil and Sean, very big smiles on their faces, and all these bulbs on thick wires strung around. By the time you got up there and onto this floor, I suppose, although there again, it was all bare and very dingy here. And in that room, that's where Shanti performed. And for a benefit to, I suppose, buy some plaster and so yeah, that was my first memory of it. And then I suppose I'd started helping. I had a term time only job, which meant I had time off. So mostly, I think, doing a lot of film pranks and stuff and shoving rock wall insulation here and there. And I remember I was plastering a wall downstairs, and there had been a call for volunteers. As you rightly said, there were times when there weren't that many people here, but once called, this whole group of people, I remember Sudhika and Anna, painting the basement white so that it could be hired out as a yoga studio. And I was plastering, and looking down at all these crowds of people, all with some brush or roller with white paint on it, doing the ceilings, skirting the doors, all at the same time. So once it was white, I was doing something or other. Artacharya came up to me and said, "Oh, well, we've looked at the basement now and it looks a bit rough. The walls are a bit rough and everything. So we've decided we want some broken colour decoration. Do you know anybody who does it?" Well, I'd had my own business for 10 years doing broken colour decorations. Yes. So Visuddhimati came up to my place, looked through my portfolios, reckoned I might be a safe-ish, and said, right, we've got this scheme going, basement yellow, foyer blue, this one red, but not red, just pinkish. And then, so that was to follow the lines of a stupa, yeah, yeah. So that's why these colours are there. So I remember starting off on this big wall downstairs in the basement. And at the time they were just replastering the foyer area, and Shantimati had got in these wonderful plasterers. A whole bunch of them were plastering away, very expert. But only one little sink on the half stairs. I don't know if you've seen those sinks, but not only did I have to go and get my buckets of water out for paint, but the plasterers also had a lad with them who was about 14, and his job was to fill up the buckets with water, and the tap was very slow. So I spent a lot of time leaning on the sink while me and this lad waiting for these buckets to fill up, watching all these plasterers doing their expert job. So that was that. And also, Kusala, you helped with that yellow wall, didn't you? You did. I did the brushwork. You painted. And mopped up all the drips. You did. Yeah, and just trying to think of other memories, some very strong memory. I think this was after the place was more or less finished. We were using there as a shine room. And we needed mats and got a roll of fabric, and we spent one Sangha night, that's how the Sangha was, rolling out the fabric, and people measured up, they scissors, marking up. A couple of people didn't want to join in, that was fine, they could be overseers. And we chopped up enough for 50 mats. So that was a fun evening.
Thank you.
I don't know that I can remember any.
No, that's great. That's a good time. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for amazing. There's the amount of painting and everything and colour is wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'll go. Shall I go next and then you and then Kulamitra? Is that all right?
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Hello. My memory sort of starts with these two really, which is that I learnt to meditate in 1990 in Nepal, which happened to be Triratna, came back and went to the LBC and then got a letter probably from one of these two from Kulamitra saying, you live in North London, come to my flat. And, it was me and my then husband, and we meditated in your flat probably for a year. So I wanted to share a couple of things, but one of the first was just, I was then involved in the sort of fundraising to get a rented centre. And in fact, Visuddhimati and I were reminiscing on the phone the other night about a couple of parties that happened at our house, which is where I still live actually, where we had games like Pass the Parcel, and the one I remember most was Pin the Third Eye on the Buddha. I can't remember, like Pin the Tail on the Donkey sort of thing. And I can't remember how we fundraised with those, but obviously people had to pay to get closest, or there was a prize or something anyway. But we did, being very much part of that. I wasn't part of this building. I was a bit busy having small children at the time. But one of the things that was very marked for me, I came along in 91, we opened around the corner in 92, and then I had babies in 94 and 96, and at that point it sort of occurred to me that actually it wasn't really possible for me to leave my life enough to do Buddhism, and I'd just had to bring Buddhism into my life as a family. So I remember pitching up, and you were probably centre manager then. I can't remember. I may have been talking to you, and just saying, "Oh, could we start a family thing?" And partly it was like, "Oh, well, Kusala and some other people already had done that before in the past." But also, what I remember is like you just push on a door and it opens. It was really good. It was like, "Oh, would you like a cupboard to keep things in between stuff?" And we had, child stuff at festival days, and we'd had a family group that started. There was actually between two families we had 5 children and 4 adults, so that was enough of a start. But I just remember everything just being, the whole sort of ethos of North London just felt very open, very inclusive, and I was really, really enjoyed all of that. And then I just remember vividly the transition here, although I wasn't building and being here. One of the things was that the centre closed. We had a period of time where St Mark's Studios as a rented thing closed, and there was at least 6 months, I think, before this opened. And it was really interesting when it reopened. In fact, I was part of that circumambulating the Buddha with the Rupa that was moved and stuff, and reopening here. But it was a very different group of people. It was interesting. It was a lot of people drifted off in that 6 months. And we came back, and it was interesting because I had quite a lot of quite good friends around the corner, and came back and was like, "Oh, where did everybody go?" And it took a while and sort of built up quite a different sort of group of people. But it's been, just really interesting preparing for today and sort of talking to everyone and saying, would you come and sort of share something? And then also we sort of put out a call to make a cake and nobody responded. So I've been making cakes this weekend, which I've decorated with 3 jewels and things, which we'll have after this. But I found myself getting really quite emotional. It's like, it wasn't like, people around me were saying, "Really, do you have to make the cake as well?" And it's just like, actually, I really want to. you know, it just feels like this is a massive cause for celebration, and it's wonderful to have been here, you know, for 31 years basically, and to see it thrive, you know, and to feel, yeah, just to be really celebrating that. So that's what I wanted to say.
I had to write things down because I lose the words and feeling a little bit emotional and overwhelmed. So, yeah. So around 1990, which
This is Visuddhimati. Most people know you, but just in case not, yeah.
So yeah, more than 30 years ago, as we've heard, Kulamitra, Ratnadakini were living in North London, and also Deva Priya and Kulananda. So you might say that the centre was just a twinkle in 8 eyes. And so they'd started classes, as you'd heard, and Kulamitra got a list of people with North London postcodes from the NLBC, which would never be allowed now with data protection.
It was barely allowed then. I really had to grovel.
So anyway, he wrote to me and Karunagita, and a group of us started meeting weekly at his house. So I can remember he who was to become Gukyapati, who was there very consistently, she who was to become Shubha, she who was to become Karunagita, amongst others. And at the same time, in parallel, Ratnadakini was doing classes in hired halls and also in Rupavati's flat, she who was to become Rupavati. Rupavati had a large living room. So Ratnadakini and to become Rupavati were running classes together. So that was the start of the North London Centre Mark II. I say Mark II because the first centre was up at Archway almost exactly 50 years ago. It started, I think, in 1972, and may even have been the very first Triratna Centre. So this is a treble anniversary, 50 years Archway, 30 years Chillingworth Road, 20 years here. So that makes 100 years. And so our 4 order members, Ratnadakini, Kulamitra, Deva Priya and Kulananda, teamed up and found premises for us for our fledgling Sangha, and we rented part of the first floor of St Mark's Studio in Chillingworth Road. So for me, I had been involved with the LBC, but the North London Centre provided me an ideal context for the next steps in my practice, because it actually suited me much better than the LBC. It was a small Sangha. I found it much easier to engage, to build connections. I soon became friends with Rupavati, and we did a lot together. We supported classes and retreats together. Later on, we did Mitra study together with Ratnadakini, and we were in GFR groups. And so Ratnadakini, my very dear friend from that time and now, you were there, you engaged with us. You offered your experience, you offered the depth of your practice very, very fully. You just gave yourself so fully. You know, we had women's days, Mitra study, women's weekends, retreats. It was sometimes intense, but always rewarding. So I've got lots of very, very deep memories from that time with this quite small women's Sangha that we had. And I just wanted to publicly thank both Ratnadakini and Kulamitra, as you're both here. I want to thank you both for your friendship and for the Kalyana Mitra that you both gave me at that time. I mean, you're both very different, and in your unique ways, I think you showed me the way, and you really enabled my path into the order. And I think, you know, it's so, it's almost like we can kind of sort of track back, you know, how these kind of lineages happen. Yeah. So very, very lovely that you're both here for the anniversary celebration, and it brings back a whole wealth of memories. There were many others that were there consistently through that early phase, but I don't have time to name them. People are scattered far and wide, and if I was to name them, it would be like one of those Mahayana sutras, where you might go on for pages and pages naming Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. You know, it has made me speculate about the origin of those kinds of Mahayanas. But I will say that all those people, that North London Centre has always been a gateway into our community. People pass through London quite a bit, they come to London, they're here for a few years, it's quite transient. And I realised how many Triratna people had started off in North London when I went to one of those big international gatherings. And so many people came up to me and they'd had their first contact at our North London Centre. There's like masses of order members that sort of started off with us here. And so out there in the wider Triratna, there's actually a huge amount of appreciation and gratitude for this centre. Yeah. So just a couple of sort of the quirkier memories of the early days of our Sangha, and Peter will remember these and some other people here. The weekend retreats which we held at National Trust base camps or camping in fields, or in the previous Vidrasana, which was quite shabby, and its predecessor Water Hall. So there was a retreat with Kulamitra where half the retreat, including myself and Kulamitra, went for an afternoon walk and we got lost in the woods. I don't know if you remember Kulamitra. And it was a bit touch and go whether we'd actually make it back in time for the next thing. And then there was the retreat at Vidrasana when the shrine room was a windowless cavern built out of hay bales, where I set the shrine on fire by sort of causing an encounter between pampas grass and a candle. And I was looking at it, I think I was in quite meditative state. There's this thing happening. And Saul had the presence of mind, he leapt into action and grabbed his jumper and he used it to put out the fire. And there were camping retreats with Peter and Artacharya. There was one where we stayed on a site with a yurt and a bender where the water supply was a tap across 2 fields. And on a farm build, and we cooked over an open fire. And on that retreat, I remember facilitating a women's group, and nearby, behind a tarpaulin, one of the retreatants was having a makeshift shower with a perforated bucket and a rope behind this tarpaulin. And my women's group had sort of got into deep water. There was a lot of emotion and tears and things. There was this kind of, we were all in our circle, and there was the retreatant having a shower and all the things that you get in a field. And there was another one with Peter where you led a very memorable Tara puja on top of West Kennet Long Barrow, and we processed across the fields carrying nightlights in jam jars, and we sat on top of the barrow doing this puja as the sun went down. It was really magical. Yeah, I mean, I did my bit for the women's Sangha. We had women's weekend retreats. And I can remember asking everyone to get up at dawn and do an Akshobhya invocation facing east as the sun came up. And when I look back, I'm amazed how people actually just joined in and kind of went along with all these things that we got up to. I mean, that in a way was the sort of precursor of the weekend retreats that Lalita Raja and I do, which are always magical, but I think they're a little more staid than those early prototypes. And yeah, the rituals, which I think we're going to hear about. So yeah, so that's a few memories. And well, I've been reflecting how helpful it is to have the building as a hub and a focus, but how it's the people that make Sangha happen. And for me, the people matter more than the building. And I had a realisation about this not long after I became chair, which was around 2007, where it was a bit touch and go whether we'd make a go of the project. It was all quite fragile. And I thought that what really mattered wasn't the bricks and mortar, but something more intangible, which lay at the heart of the community. And so that was my intuition at the time. It's something about the heart of the project being founded on a mutual aspiration and a mutual responsiveness of those involved. So if I give you an image, it's a bit like the jewels in Indra's net, which are all reflecting each other. And that's our individual practice, but it illuminates and gets reflected by the practice of others. So in a way, my practice isn't sort of separate. It's like Kulamitra was saying in his
talk about the way that we're all doing it together, and we're all wherever we're at. So we create this kaleidoscope with a potential to outdo the vision of Varochana's tower, which you can ask us about later. And so my hunch was, if we all came together and engaged in that way, then everything else would sort of come right and fall into place. So we sort of move from being this disparate collection of individuals to becoming more of a working sangha, to more of a practice community, which is really rooted in the Dharma. So that was my wish at that time, and that remains my wish today. Yeah. So that's my reflection.
Thank you.
Okay.
Last but no way least.
Yeah, well, I have been here since before the beginning, so there's probably quite a bit to say.
But not very long to say it.
One thing to say is that, inevitably things have their ups and downs. So I remember that group that I had in my house, I actually ran it for 2 years. But the first year, they're mainly local people from around Crouch End who are not very committed to Triratna as such. And I had to change the day of the group. I couldn't do the day we'd been doing, and just changing the day basically was a sort of complete turnover of people. It was like, I've got my Tai Chi, I've got my yoga, And so there've been a number of kind of starts and restarts, I think, over the years. When we moved to the new rented premises, it was amazing to see all the people who did turn up, who were already involved with Triratna. For instance, Abhaya Ratna was actually someone who was around the LBC when I went there in 1978. And he'd become a mitra, and I think he actually lived in the community there at one time, but he completely drifted away from things apart from a few friendships, such as David Priya. But I remember him coming through the door and it was like, oh, great, I know this guy. And as you say, he was very shy about his involvement at that point. But a few months later, we were all going on an order convention, all the 4 of us who were running the place, the order members. And we said, well, Chris, you've been a mitra longer than anybody else. Could you just lead the puja on the Friends Night? And he was completely gobsmacked. We said, but you know it. And that's exactly what Visuddhimati was talking about. We were always very encouraging. We needed the help, but also it was very good for people to have that opportunity. And that's the kind of thing that, people get confidence. It's like, wow, I can lead a class, and then we became mitra convener eventually. So I remember that very well. I think it was always, I knew it was going to be a huge transition coming to this building from the old building. I was quite shocked when I looked at some of those videos, actually how much work there was to be done. And when I turned up the first day, we'd asked people to turn up, to kind of sort out who could do what. I thought I was coming along to kind of do a little bit of DIY, because surely there'd be somebody much more experienced than me. And then I realized that I'd done my own house up twice, and Peter, by virtue of having been at art college, was skilled. So we basically had to lead the project. Mm-hmm. And although we got a lot of help, people, I didn't realize how much in the modern age people just pay when they need a job done, you know what I mean? Mm. So at one point, you can probably see in that video, there was a huge amount of wood stud walls. And I'd left someone to nail some bits of timber together. And they came and got me and they said that the nail won't go in the timber. And I said, well, show me what you're doing. And they were doing this. And I said, look, that's okay for lining it up, but then you have to. So it was amazing that we actually managed to get that work done. And it was hard. I mean, it coincided for me with the birth of my first child. And often, it was great on the weekends when there were volunteers, but when it was just you and me and Articharya slogging away, and Phil.
Yeah.
Phil's in a lot of the photos, yeah.
It was quite hard going. Mm. One of my more amused moments, which was repeated, was because I just had a child, so I was up half the night, And I'd probably been up, since early in the morning, had my breakfast, meditated, and then I used to go in the car and pick you and Artichari up. And they'd come staggering out. I'd have to knock on the door 3 or 4 times loudly to wake them up. And they'd come into the centre and they'd got cornflakes and milk and they had their breakfast before starting work. And yeah, Phil's a kind of local guy, and he was at a loose end. He came in a lot and he was very, very helpful. And you can see in that video, when we put up the plasterboard ceilings, we had to jam the plasterboard up somehow so that we could then go and screw it in the right place. So we worked out this way of doing it with wooden battens. And Phil was helping me do that. So he was up a ladder holding the wood while I jammed in the bottom end. And then I said, "You can come down now, Phil." He said, "I can't, I'm stuck." And his glove, fortunately not his finger, but the end of the glove was now jammed between the ceiling and the battens. So yes, we were probably lucky there weren't some serious injuries. But it was good fun. And, I'm amazed looking at those videos just how much we got done. But I was aware that the transition was going to be, to fill up this place, we had to move out of the rented place because it was jam-packed. There was no more room and we needed bigger premises. But the strange thing was, quite a lot of those people never even came to look at the new building once. Some people were just like, "No, you've taken away my nice little centre and I'm not having anything to do with this." And it has taken a long time to fill out. And it's really good to see the place flourishing now, because it wasn't just a question of doing the building work. It wasn't even just a question of paying off the mortgage. It's kind of almost like reinventing the Sangha in your new premises and getting new people along and using it. And there's still a long way to go, to me. I mean, my vision of the place is that it should be full, but that should be a base. We're called the North London Buddhist Centre, and we could be doing so much more in North London eventually. So I hope that, I'm still around when we have our 30th anniversary of the building, 40th, and I can come back and see, even more progress and see even more use of the base that we've created for ourselves.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't have happened without, particularly you three, but, and, all of us really, but you, Visuddhimati. I mean, I do feel a huge debt of gratitude to all of you in different, in different ways.